Welcome back to the Sundowners Club. House of the Dragon Season 2 finale has aired, and we've got a lot to talk about as we wrap up this season. We're going to get into some of the things that maybe you missed during the episode, what we thought about the episode, and what it means for the future of not only House of the Dragon, but Game of Thrones. And we're going to do that right now here on the Sundowners Club. So, welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to us all season as we've covered this show. One of the best shows on streaming, on television. And while season 2, I think, missed the mark a little bit compared to season 1, it doesn't mean it wasn't a good show, wasn't a quality show. And again, we're going to get into the major beats of what happened this season and what it means for the future. But let's start with what happened at the very beginning of the episode. So we started with the tapestry for the intro that we've seen all season long, and it ended with a lot of dragons. So we saw some dragons in there that you may have recognized by the sheer color and design. We've got Silverwing, we've got Vermithor, we've got Vhagar, we've got Sea Smoke. So what it goes to paint a portrait of is this ultimate dance of dragons is now that we're being introduced to a lot of the dragons that have been brought into the fight with the various dragon riders. So that's what the tapestry ended on, is it created that black blob of ink in the tapestry that sent us to the House of the Dragon logo. We then went to a location that we haven't seen before, and it was what I call Pirates Cove. It was a location, an exotic tropical location, where our boy Tyland Lannister has been sent on behalf of the madman, the Prince Regent, Aemond Targaryen, to try to go get the aid of the Triarchy to break the blockade of King's Landing and take out the Valyrian fleet and the Sea Snake. And one of the funny things about it was we haven't had a whole lot of comedy in this season of House of the Dragon, but Tyland seemed to provide a little bit of that light comedy that we've really been missing as he's negotiating with the Triarchy. You know, you saw the Mirish captains, the Taroshi captains, and they want the Stepstones. And so, you know, through this negotiation, Tyland agrees to give them the Stepstones, even though he knows he may pay for it with his head. But at the end of the day, he needs to get a deal done. So he does that, and he thinks he's done. Let me go take a bath, get some wine. Not so fast, Tyland. We've got someone named Lohar, who is the captain, the admiral of the fleet of the Triarchy. And Lohar shows himself, and very consistent with what Lohar was in the book. You know, this trans-type character that we've seen before in Game of Thrones. You know, Game of Thrones has not been shy about having characters like this, but they make sense within the story. So Lohar basically says, "What kind of man are you? I want to challenge you." And Tyland doesn't really know what that means, but he says, "Okay, let's go." He knows he needs Lohar's acceptance and agreement so they can have the fleet, and he agrees to whatever demand Lohar is going to require of him. We then cut to a location that maybe seemed familiar, but people didn't quite know what it was. On first glance, it looked like it may have been Storm's End, but Storm's End has a round dome on top of it. So it ended up being the location of Sharp Point. And Aemond Targaryen was there sitting on Vhagar. He's burned Sharp Point. Thousands have died. The city is burning. The castle's burning. And so Aemond is lashing out at this point. Aemond's frustrated. So he does the only thing he knows how to do, which is get on the back of Vhagar and go find a strategic castle location to burn. And that's what he did. And so, you know, what's interesting is we haven't seen a lot of Aemond this year, this season on House of the Dragon. He's averaging, his character, the actor, is averaging around 2 to 3 minutes of screen time per episode. I don't know if you all caught that during this season, but I think that's a little bit of a mistake on the writers and the showrunners' part. I think we need to see more of Aemond Targaryen. And, you know, I hope that we see that in season 3 as we move forward. We then cut to King's Landing, and King Aegon is still recovering, lying in bed. He's getting taken care of by Grand Maester Orwell, who's taking good care of Aegon. He tells him he's a good man, and Aegon just wants to drink and relax, and he's defeated. And in walks Larys, and Larys has been building this bond with Aegon through his injuries. And he tells him, "Look, we've got to leave King's Landing." And Aegon doesn't understand why they would do that. Let's just arrest Aemond when he gets back with Vhagar, throw him in the cells. Not going to be that easy. And Larys tells him, "Look, you're wounded, but let these two factions fight it out with each other. Let them kill each other, and then you can come back as the king that can pick up the pieces and bring peace to the realm. And so he floats that idea to Aegon. Look, he's going to kill you. So you've got to get out of here. I've got a place in Bravos. I've stashed away a lot of money. We can live comfortably. Let's wait this thing out. It's actually a really sound strategy because Aegon is in no condition to fight. He believes that his dragon is dead, Sunfire. Is Sunfire dead? We don't know quite yet, but Aegon believes he's dead. And so he's starting to trust Larys. He understands the strategy, and Larys is putting a plan in motion that we probably will see play out over the next two final seasons of House of the Dragon. We then cut to one of several shots this episode, which were really a little disjointed because they're very quick shots. One is of Rhaena in the Vale, and she's starving, she's thirsty, she's cold, and she runs down. She's trying to find this dragon and track it. And first thing she needs to do is she needs to find some place to drink. So she finds a creek, she runs down, and she drinks water, and then it cuts away from her. And it's one of several scenes like that in the episode that were just really quick. And I think they would have been better served to have a little bit longer extended scene with Rhaena, that ran maybe a couple of minutes. And that way they didn't cut back to her several times throughout the episode for like 20, 30 seconds. It was a little disjointed. I do like Rhaena as a character and obviously the story of her trying to find this dragon, but we'll see where they go with it in season 3. But it was one of those, blink and you miss it type scenes that we saw multiple times throughout the episode. We then cut to Dragonstone, and into the hall of the painted table walks Jace, Valerian, and at the end of the day, we've got these dragon riders now. Jace does not like Ulf the White. Is Ulf really poking at Jace, teasing him, prodding him, or, according to Hugh Hammer, is it more likely that Ulf just doesn't have any etiquette in how to deal with nobles and the new responsibility that has been given him? I think it's more likely that Ulf just doesn't have great character. He's not trained or educated in the etiquette, and so it's a combination of both. And so you see Hugh being way more measured than Ulf. He's quiet, he's respectful to Jace, and he corrects Ulf. But Ulf obviously is poking and prodding a little bit. And initially I thought, well, it's just that he's not trained. But then when you see the scene of him as he walks by Jace, he bumps him in the shoulder. And that's, to me, a sign of, hey, I'm on the same level as you. Doesn't matter that you're the son of Queen Rhaenyra. And so that was a little teeny bit of foreshadowing about how everything's going to play out with Ulf the White, I believe. We then cut to a scene that is another scene that didn't really work all that well. And it was two really good actors that have done a great job on the show, Rhaenyra and Corlys, and they're on the dock, and his ship is ready to sail. He's ready to take the Valyrian fleet to try to take King's Landing. So for Corlys, it's not about his own exploits anymore, so he's renaming the sea snake in honor of Rhaenys, and he's going to name it the Queen That Never Was. And so, it's a good way to honor Rhaenys. It shows where Corlys' head is. He's not doing this for Rhaenyra. And is that going to play into things as we get further into this war? Because when you're not 100% dedicated to your queen or your king, and you have other motivations, and then things get really tough, people die, you have losses, what does that do to your motivations if you never really were motivated to serve the individual in the first place? That's something to keep an eye on with Corlys, because he was very clear about saying, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for Rhaenys. And so they talk about the dragons, and now that she has the advantage, and Corlys leaves her with a bit of advice. You have to press the advantage right now. You've got it. Let's take them out. Let's get this thing over with. And so she's listening to Corlys to some degree, which is a welcome thing to see from Rhaenyra, because for the last 4 or 5 episodes, she's listening to nobody but Mysaria. So it's good that she's finally listening to someone else, which, oh, by the way, happens to be the Hand of the Queen. We then cut to Harrenhal, and Sir Alfred Broom has arrived, wants to speak with Daemon Targaryen, and Simon Strong brings Alfred Broom to Daemon. Daemon walks out to the God's Wood, and as Alfred Broom is talking to him, you can tell right away that Sir Alfred Broom doesn't believe in Rhaenyra as queen, believes the realm needs a king, a strong king, and he's backing Daemon, and Daemon knows that he's a turncoat. So I think he calls him actually a turncloak. And so, that's something to keep an eye on as well for Alfred Broom. He's basically painting himself as a traitor to Rhaenyra, and Daemon, at least for the moment, allows that to happen. But one of the things that you may have missed in the episode was when Sir Alfred Broom is speaking to Daemon in the Godswood, you hear a whisper. And if you really turn up the volume on whatever TV or device you're listening to, you may have made out the word traitor. And so is this Harrenhal and the Godswood, again, pushing the sense of magic and the history and knowing how to get into the people's heads that are there and that reside at Harrenhal? Maybe. But it certainly is foreshadowing that Alfred Broom is someone that we cannot trust. And it's going to be interesting to see what is Daemon going to do to Alfred Broom as we move forward in the Dance of Dragons. We then cut back to King's Landing, and Helaena and Alicent have a nice moment where Helaena is trying to figure out how they're being viewed by the people, this war that's going to impact the small folk. Helaena seems to be one of the only individuals who is really concerned about the small folk, doesn't want to take part in this war, doesn't want to kill, and she's talking to Alicent, and as Alicent starts to broach the subject to her, hey, would you be willing to leave King's Landing? Let's potentially leave here. And as she does that, Aemond walks in, and he needs dragons. And for those that maybe haven't paid attention or forgot season 1, Helaena has one of the oldest dragons in the realm next to Vhagar, Dreamfire. It's a nasty dragon. It's a big dragon, smaller than Vhagar, but a very big dragon, a dangerous dragon, a formidable dragon. But Helaena does not want to ride it, and she doesn't want to kill. And she knows that if she takes to the dragon and she rides into battle, that the small folk are going to suffer and are going to be killed. And as Aemond is trying to convince Helaena to take the dragon mount on Dreamfire and help him in the battle, Alicent steps in and says, Aemond, you only preside over death and destruction. And so she wants Helaena to have no part of this. And for the moment, she pushes back on Aemond, and he's frustrated. He tries to put Alicent in her place, but to no avail. At least for the moment, he doesn't have the support of Helaena to aid him in this battle. So Aemond is a dangerous individual right now because he's desperate, and it's starting to show over the last 2 episodes. As that scene wraps up, we see Alicent go to Grand Maester Orwyle, and she needs the help of Orwyle to get out of King's Landing. She's asked for his help before, and he's come through. So she has a plan. She wants to get out of there. We don't quite know yet where she's going, but Alicent is getting out of King's Landing. We then cut to a scene with Sir Criston Cole, the guy everybody loves to hate, and Gawain Hightower, Alicent's brother, and he's got a sword at Criston Cole's throat. He knows now that Criston Cole has slept with his sister, the Queen Dowager Alicent, and he's calling him out on it, but Sir Criston Cole almost has a defeated look. He knows what's going to happen based on what he's already seen at Rook's Rest. And I thought there were some important lines as we see a shot of Gawain standing there with Criston Cole and Criston Cole looking down as he's being philosophical about everything that has happened and that will happen. And I thought he had some of the best lines of the episode where he says that true honor is a mist that melts in the morning. The dragons dance and men are like dust under their feet. We march now toward our annihilation. To die would be kind of a relief. So, great lines from Criston Cole. Whether you like him or not, he understands what's going to happen. He's a soldier, and he knows that everything has been taken out of their hands, and now they have these atomic bombs that are raining overhead, and nobody can control them. And he knows that the people on the ground on all sides are going to suffer. And I think Criston also knows ultimately there's no way out. And he's accepting this. Gawain Hightower is starting to come to some of the same conclusions, but it's just taking him a little bit longer to really get there. But Sir Criston Cole's words certainly made an impression on Gawain. We then cut to Tyland Lannister at the Pirates' Cove, the tropical island, and Lohar wants to mud wrestle. Lohar wants to see what Tyland is made of, and Tyland looks like he's going to be defeated, but at the end, he comes through, he shows his worth, and Lohar is impressed by Tyland and invites Tyland to a dinner and drinks that night and commits the ships of the Triarchy to Tyland. It's a very comedic scene. It's one of a few scenes with Tyland this episode, and the actor does a great job. And at the end, Lohar says, "I want you to have sex with my wives." And the funny response from Tyland was, "How many wives do you have?" And so I thought it brought a good bit of comedy relief to a season that needed that a little bit more because the subject matter is so heavy. But great acting by the actor that plays Tyland and Jason Lannister in House of the Dragon. We then come back to Dragonstone, and Baela and Jace are talking, and Jace is frustrated. He's talking to Baela about the fact that these dragon riders are going to minimize the importance of someone like himself being a dragon rider and being a Valerian and a Targaryen. And Baela is really coming back at him and saying, look, that's not what makes you who you are. You know, you have a lot to offer. You have a destiny. You know, you have worth. And you're tying everything to these dragons. You're tying everything to the fact that, you know, other people now are dragon riders, but that's not what makes you someone who can lead men and women. And so I think she's trying to reassert the confidence in Jace. But one of the things I think that's been missing this season, and I don't know why the showrunners and the writers didn't, you know, go down this road, was I think we needed to have some moments with Jace and Baela, since they're engaged, where they're physical with each other. There's been 4 or 5 conversations with them speaking, having conversation this season that were fine, but it's the same conversation over and over. It seems a little redundant. And when you watch the season back or you decide to binge it, these are going to be conversations that all run together and seem the same. And so I think they needed to mix it up a little bit. They needed some passion between these two actors. That's just my opinion. I don't know why they didn't do that, but I think that it would have served the story and the two characters well leading into the events of season 3. We then have the second scene I mentioned before of multiple scenes with Rhaena and the Vale, starving again, cold, and trying to seek out this dragon. We then cut to Tyland singing and celebrating with Lohar as now he's got the aid of the Triarchy. They're 2 relatively quick scenes, but the Rhaena scene is just one of a few that should have been cut together for a little bit longer scene. We then go back to Dragonstone, and we have dinner with Queen Rhaenyra and her dragon riders, and you still feel the tension between Jace and Ulf. Ulf doesn't have good table manners, and everybody seems to be staring at him. One of the interesting things about this scene was Ulf challenges the character, so to speak, of Adam of Hull, and Adam says, when the time reveals itself, we'll see who has character. We'll see who's a coward and who's not. And so I think what you're seeing there is a cocky, arrogant individual and someone who's more measured, Adam of Hull. What's Adam going to ultimately be made of when he's tested in battle? What's Ulf the White going to be made of? I think we're seeing the beginning of what ultimately is going to be 2 characters who are either going to make peace with each other or they're going to be on opposite ends of this war that's going to be fought. So it's interesting to see what's happening between those 2 characters and that being set up. So as Rhaenyra wraps up the dinner with the marching orders for the Dragon Riders, she sent a raven from Harrenhal. Simon Strong is letting her know that Daemon Targaryen has raised the armies, but we don't know where his allegiance is, and that concerns Rhaenyra. So she asks Adam of Hull to join her, and they are on their way to Harrenhal. Okay, everybody. Once we leave Rhaenyra's dinner, we have a critical part of the season, of the series, and it is Daemon Targaryen in bed at Harrenhal, and he awakes, and Alice Rivers is back. She's sitting at the foot of the bed, and she's not outwardly crying, but she's got tears in her eyes and tears streaming down her face. And Daemon is a little alarmed, and she says she's going to the Godswood. And so as he walks out there with her, it's an important scene as we start to see shots of the weirwood tree. And one thing you may have missed was there was a character with antlers that was scurrying behind the weirwood tree and then disappears. Who was that character? We've never seen them before in either Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. And that character is known as the Green Men. The Green Men are characters that have been around for thousands of years, and they reside on the Isle of Faces. And when the peace was brokered between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, what resulted of that was the Green Men. And so we don't know how the Green Men are going to play into the future of this series, but it has to be more than just a quick little Easter egg. You have to think that there's going to be something at play here as we move into season 3 and 4 around the Isle of Faces, which is that island in the middle of the lake that's outside of Harrenhal, which is known as the God's Eye. So keep an eye on that as we move forward in the series. As Daemon Targaryen walks with Alicent to the tree, and we see shots of Daemon talking to Alicent, Alicent tells Daemon, "There are omens here for those that seek them." She asks Daemon if he's ready to learn what is given him. He touches the tree as you see blood pour down the tree over his hand. And here is the vision as we see shots that to some people maybe don't make sense. But here we go. So the first thing we see is the blood trickles down. We see the roots of a tree, and we see a character with a birthmark on their face, and a raven flows from it. That character is known as Blood Raven. For those of you that maybe remember the three-eyed raven from Game of Thrones, who was an old man at the time, that is the character that we're seeing in the younger face that is Blood Raven. We then cut to a shot of the White Walkers, and this White Walker looks a little different, but we don't know who they are. It just could be just a regular White Walker. But it's foreshadowing that winter's coming, the long night. And then we cut to dead dragons. The one dragon in the front looks like it could possibly be Vermithor, but not really sure on that. But there are multiple dragons because you see other wings behind the primary dragon that's dead. And then you see all these bodies as Daemon is walking over them on a battlefield. Then we see a critical scene. Daemon steps into a puddle of water and he starts to drown. He's falling into deep water, drowning. And then we cut to something we saw before in Game of Thrones, in season 2 of Game of Thrones, the Red Comet, foreshadowing that dragons are back in the world of Westeros. We have a shot of the 3 dragon eggs in the fire, and then we get the shot of Daenerys Targaryen with her hatchlings that we saw in the original Game of Thrones series. The vision ends up with Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne as Daemon is looking upon her, and then a character speaks to him and says, "It's all a story, and you are but one part of it. You know your part." And that person was the seer, the dreamer, Helaena. And so, very interesting stuff. As we then cut to Helaena standing over Maegor's holdfast, and she's looking out over King's Landing, and Aemond has come back to her again, and you see that she's speaking in Daemon's vision. And so she is not only having these visions that for the last season and a half, we weren't really sure if she could interpret them, but now we know she absolutely does interpret these things. And Aemond is putting pressure on her again. He wants her to mount Dreamfire to help him in the battle, and she calls him out and says, "If I don't accept, will you burn me like you did Aegon and let him fall?" He calls that a lie. He says he could have her killed. And she says, "It's not a lie. I saw it." And he's stunned. He doesn't realize that she has knowledge, that she's seen these things, and it's now hitting him all at once. Helaena then goes on to say, "Aegon will be king again. He sits on a wooden throne, and you will be dead, lost in the God's eye, never to be seen again." And you see tears in Aemon's eyes. He knows she's telling the truth, but he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't know how to process it. And he also knows that he does not have the support of Helaena. But this is a critical scene because Helaena, in the books, we don't get so much of this side of Helaena. But Helaena has the visions that she sees everything that has happened and that's going to happen. We've seen that before, right? We've seen it with the three-eyed raven. We've seen it with Bran. And so maybe she doesn't have the abilities of the three-eyed raven, but she certainly has seen these powerful visions that are taking place past, present, and future. And so will we explore more of that in season 3? How much more are we going to see of Helaena? She seems to be a fragile individual, but this was a powerful scene. Daemon's vision. And really, I've seen people question whether this gets into the prince that was promised. What Daemon is seeing, there's a couple things you need to know. One, Daemon doesn't necessarily understand everything he sees, but it's showing his line of him and Rhaenyra, the lineage that he's going to have beyond their lives. Bloodraven's going to come 100 years later. Daenerys is going to come almost 200 years later. He doesn't know who these individuals are, but he knows that they are the line of the Targaryens, and he knows enough of the vision to know that there is a major threat coming, and he knows that he has to play his part in it. And so interpretation of dreams and visions is always a fine line to walk, because you can interpret a vision the wrong way and it be devastating to the realm. But the Targaryens have always had a sense of manifest destiny, and that they are the line, that their bloodline are the ones to be able to complete these prophecies. And now Daemon has played his part in it, and we'll see what his actions are going forward. We then cut to Rhaenyra and Adam of Hull on their dragons arriving in Harrenhal, and this is the best visual shot of the episode to me by far. It shows the armies, it shows Caraxes, and as she lands on her dragon, Syrax, she has to walk up this incline to meet Simon Strong, and you see this wider shot of Harrenhal. It's really beautifully shot, and as she greets Simon Strong, he's a little surprised that she showed up herself, and he tells her that it was as he suspected. He doesn't really know where Daemon's allegiance is, and she's going to go in and she's going to deal with this head on. And as she walks into the main hall at Harrenhal, you have all these soldiers and noblemen, and she walks in, and they're all staring at her. And Syrax lands on top of the open roof of Harrenhal, and they all part. And here comes Daemon, and as he greets Rhaenyra, she's very smart about what she does next. She backs up as he tells her that these men have pledged to him, and she says, "But who have you pledged to, Daemon? Who do you serve?" And she says it loudly so that they all can hear that she's challenging him to announce before everybody, where do your allegiances lie? And then he starts speaking in Valyrian to her, and he tells her that winter is coming, darkness and doom, that he doesn't see how they can withstand it, but they must, and that his brother Viserys has chosen her to unite the realm, and that he is there to serve her, the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, Queen Rhaenyra, and he pledges his sword to her, and she says, "Don't leave me again." And he then turns around, he rallies his armies, he raises his sword. As he's doing that, we see the traitor Alfred Broom. He exits the scene. They should have arrested him right then and there, because at this point, Daemon knows he's a traitor to Rhaenyra. She doesn't trust Alfred Broom. And so why they didn't just capture Alfred Broom right then and there, I don't know. But is this going to have ramifications further down the line? You don't want traitors that are nobles just floating about the realm. It can be dangerous. So we'll see what happens with Alfred Broom as we move forward in the story. We then cut back to a scene with Alyn of Hull and Corlys as they're getting ready to depart, and he basically says he just wants to help Alyn out, and Alyn's had enough of Corlys, pandering to him. He calls him out. He says, "Look, you were never a father to us. We starved to death. We had to fight every single day to survive and to exist. And as you were prancing around with your son and daughter who are now gone and eating the best foods, and we got to see that every single day. So I'm going to serve your house because I'm a man of duty, but I don't want any help from you." And so Alyn is basically calling out Corlys in a way that Corlys is probably not used to ever being called out before, but Corlys has to accept it because he's responsible for what's happened to Alyn and Adam of Hull. And so it's a good scene showing that Alyn, as angry as he is at Corlys, he is loyal. And so that's an important character trait when you're trying to win a war. We then have the third scene that, again, I've talked about. Didn't make a lot of sense to cut it up into 30-second increments of Rhaena running around the Vale, and she sees now a dragon flying. She knows she's getting closer to finding the dragon. And then as that happens, we then have a shot of Rhaenyra Targaryen looking out over Dragonstone, and we have the character that I have least enjoyed this season, Mysaria. And she's talking to Rhaenyra, and thank goodness we did not get much of Mysaria in this episode. We need other characters. They've spent a lot of time on Mysaria, and to me, it's the weakest point of the show this season has been the relationship with Mysaria and Rhaenyra. And we have a small conversation where she's telling Rhaenyra that she's the rightful queen and that she can end this war and win it. And so Rhaenyra is telling her, yeah, but at what cost? because Rhaenyra is starting to think about the small folk as well, which is really odd because the week before, she didn't think about the small folk when the characters were getting burned by Vermithor. So this is an inconsistency on Rhaenyra's part, and it's maybe something to watch out for as we move forward. We then cut to Rhaenyra in bed at night, and she's awoken by her Queen's Guard, and there's somebody there to see her. As she walks down into the library, which, by the way, we've seen this library every episode this season, so they sure took advantage of this set. But she goes into the library, and who is it? It's Alicent. And Alicent is there. To me, this scene did not make sense. No more than the scene earlier in the season when they met made sense. But this one definitely didn't make sense. Alicent is trying to leave it all behind, and Rhaenyra says, wait a second, no. You can't just say, hey, now that things have gone against us, I'm going to wash my hands of it, and there's no ramifications or repercussions. So Rhaenyra calls her out, and Alicent says, no, listen, I thought I was doing what was right, but it just ended up being completely wrong. She then plays upon Rhaenyra's sensibilities around her father by mentioning Viserys and how he missed his wife. He never truly got over her. And you see Rhaenyra start to soften up. So Alicent is manipulating her by playing upon her emotions. And so she then says, look, I want Helaena to be safe and her child, my granddaughter, I want to be able to leave King's Landing. But when Aemond goes to meet Criston Cole in the Riverlands, he will be gone with Vhagar. We will open the gates for you since Helaena will be in charge, and we want no bloodshed. And if you come in 3 days' time, that's what will happen. And Rhaenyra says, wait a second. What of Aegon? And she then tells her that Aegon is broken. So she's giving up critical information to the enemy. And it's not only critical information, but it's her son. And she then says, Alicent, you know that it's not possible to just show up. I have to have Aegon's head, and it has to be in front of the public. And so at the end of the day, Alicent backs up from her, and she's trying to negotiate, but then Rhaenyra says, a son for a son. This scene made no sense because we already saw a grandchild, a baby, get beheaded in King's Landing, Helena's child, her son, the heir. And there already was a son for a son, but Alicent didn't call it out. She just sits there and nods. She agrees to serve up Aegon, her son, to Rhaenyra. The scene just didn't make sense for me. And I understand why they're trying to put pieces in place, but from a narrative standpoint, this was the weakest part of it. Overall, what I thought was a good episode, but this scene just didn't make sense for me. And so Alicent agrees that she's going to let Rhaenyra come into King's Landing. But what Alicent doesn't know is that Aegon and Larys are leaving King's Landing, and that's the wild card. One other thing to note about the meeting between Alicent and Rhaenyra is as Rhaenyra's pushing back on her and demanding Aegon's head, you see Alicent, she's turned around and she starts biting her nails again. That's a callback to the anxiety that she had as a teenager growing up, and then we saw it as an adult. That whenever things get really tough for Alicent, she starts going straight to the fingernails. She's always biting. And so it's a tell that she's extremely nervous and anxious. And so I thought that was one part of the scene that did work well was you see that Alicent's desperate. She's desperate to get out of this situation completely. But she's got children, she's got grandchildren, and she's got brothers. And this is not an easy thing to just rid yourself of. And then she's got her father, Otto. So how's all this going to play out? As they wrap up the conversation, again, Rhaenyra is telling her about duty and about everything that has to happen. And then she tells Rhaenyra, come with me. Well, you just heard her talk about her duty to the realm as the queen. You're going to serve up King's Landing, but then you ask Rhaenyra to come with you. Just didn't make sense. It was sloppy writing. It was the one part of the episode that just didn't work. I don't know how you felt about it. Let me know in the comments below, but this was certainly the weakest part of the episode. So as we cut to the end of the episode, you could hear the music starting to ramp up. You see the Dragon Riders putting their armor on. They're getting ready to go to battle. You see the Hightower armies from Old Town marching, and we see a blue dragon flying over them. That dragon is Tessarion, and that is Daeron the Daring coming from Old Town, and that is the son of Alicent that we haven't seen on the show yet, so it's going to be exciting to see Daeron in Season 3. He is flying on his dragon Tessarion with the Hightower army. We then see the Lannister army marching, and then we see House Frey, the twins, and the Winter Wolves are marching across the bridge. They have entered the fray, and it's going to be exciting to see the Winter Wolves. We then have a shot of Otto in a prison cell. Who has arrested and imprisoned Otto? If you know the geography of Westeros and where Otto was headed to, and then also some things that have happened in the past, you might get an idea of just who exactly has Otto. But the bigger question is going to be, how's Otto going to get free? Who's going to free him? Those are questions that we're going to get answered early on in Season 3. But it was great to see our guy Otto show back up. Certainly, Team Green has needed the counsel of Otto Hightower this season. They've fallen apart since he left. We then cut to the seas, and we see Tyland and Lohar and the Triarchy. They're headed to the Gullet. We see Alyn of Hull and Corlys Velaryon headed to the Queen That Never Was ship. They're headed to the Gullet. We have been 2 seasons, and Corlys Velaryon has never been in a sea battle. And even at the end, we don't even see him on his ship. We see him on a boat rowing to the ship. So when are we going to get Corlys on a ship in battle? Hopefully we see that early in Season 3. The last couple of scenes before the credits roll, we see Rhaena finally coming upon a wild dragon that stares at her and roars. It is the dragon Sheep Stealer. Is Rhaena going to bond with this dragon? We don't know yet, but she's facing down the dragon. We then see Alicent just walking out of Dragonstone, and she looks at a sunrise, and we see Rhaenyra in the library staring off as well. And the credits roll for Season 2. It's a wrap. We're probably going to have a long wait before Season 3. Some final thoughts as we wrap up Season 2. And I really appreciate everybody sticking with us for our reviews and our breakdowns this season. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. My final thoughts are that this season had some issues, but it still was a good season. I think the team that put together this season, they did so during the writer's strike and with a lot of changes at Warner Brothers and HBO. And I believe what happened was they had a bigger battle, something that was going to happen in the 9th and 10th episodes of Season 2. And due to budget constraints and moving that funding to the next fiscal year, I think what happened was they had to cut it to 8 episodes. And so what you were seeing in a season finale would have probably been the normal 8th episode. And then we would have gotten episode 9 and 10 to round out this season. That's just my opinion of some people that I've spoken to with some knowledge of the situation. I don't know if that's accurate or not. That's my gut feeling, is that we were meant to see something in the form of the 9th and 10th episode that we didn't see due to cost. This is a very expensive show. We saw a lot of it on the screen this season, on location shooting, dragons, the Battle of Rook's Rest. But again, this is an expensive show, and the problem with that is that you make people wait so long before we get to Season 3 that I think it could upset some people when you end on a note that they did with Season 2 with just setup. So what I would say is I thought this was a good season, not as good as Season 1. The writers, there were certainly some issues with the writing of certain characters in the show this season, but there were also some great moments. I really loved what Tom Glenn Carney did as Aegon. I loved Otto Hightower. I really loved what they did with Larys and what they did with Helena. I thought Helena was a better character this season than she is in the books. And so I enjoyed a lot of characters this season, and I think if they focus more on those characters and less on some of the ones that we spent a lot of time with, like Mysaria, I think the show will be better for it. And I know Daemon and Harrenhal stuck in Luigi's Mansion all season long has probably upset some people. I personally enjoyed it. I like the tie-in to the old gods and to magic and divisions. So I personally enjoyed it, but I'm looking forward to Season 3. And look, we may have to wait almost 2 years for Season 3 to come out, but we don't have to wait that long for something new in the world of Westeros. We have a Night of the Seven Kingdoms coming out next year, 6 episodes. The Tales of Dunk and Egg. I'm really excited about it. We're going to be here to cover it. What did you think about Season 2 of House of the Dragon? What were your thoughts? Let us know. What did you like? What did you not like? While you're doing that, smash that like button while leaving the comments. Hit the notifications bell for future content. And most importantly, hit subscribe and share with your friends as we continue to grow our channel. and TCB.